our official launch of Let Rhode Island Vote. My name is Marcela Bettencourt, and I'm the director of the Latino Policy Institute and a very proud member of the Rhode Island Voting Access Coalition. Our coalition, which is composed of over 30 organizations, has proudly worked over the years to advance the cause for voting rights in Rhode Island. So due to the ongoing pandemic, our launch today is taking a hybrid method. So some of us are here today, including some of our wonderful sponsors, as well as some of our other supporting organizations. We're streaming this event today through our Facebook, as well as Capitol TV. If you're watching alongside of us in either method, please make sure to tag us at LetRI.vote or with the hashtag #LetRhodeIslandVote. So today, we're really excited to be able to bring a small but very mighty group together with our legislative sponsors to renew our support for Let Rhode Island Vote and same-day registration resolution. So to start us off, it is my pleasure to introduce Senator Dawn Oyer, who is sponsoring the Let Rhode Island Vote Act in the Senate. Senator?
Thank you everyone for being here today and launching this important campaign for expansion of voting rights in Rhode Island. I want to give a special recognition to my friend and colleague, Senator DeMario, for her sponsorship and support of this legislation as well, and I know she'll be speaking later on in the program. I also want to give a special thanks to Marcela for all of your work pulling this together. Leading a coalition like this is never easy, and so I appreciate all the work that it's done, that it's taken to get us here today. For me, there's no more important thing than we can be talking about in our country right now than voting. We are, just past a year of the events of January 6th of last year. And I think, we really recognize that we are at a fragile moment in time in our democracy. And what really matters to people is to make sure that the pillars of our democracy are strong, and a critically important piece of that is access to the vote, access to making sure that your voice is heard, your vote is counted. And so I'm very proud to work with all of you who are here today, all of the members of the coalition, to really expand on the lessons learned from the pandemic, that we can update, modernize our voting here in Rhode Island to give access to more people, while also ensuring that the vote is secure and safe for everyone to participate. So I look forward to the first time being able to have early voting in Rhode Island statute and Rhode Island general laws, being able to remove, onerous requirements that are really, quite frankly, outdated around having notarization requirements that really does nothing more than block people from participating in voting. So I don't want to take too much more time because I know we have a lengthy list of speakers today, but I also do want to recognize my friend and colleague, Senator Quesada, who is here in support as well. And I want to thank everyone from the coalition, and I look forward to working with all of you to getting this legislation across the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Oyer. Appreciate that. And so next, we also wanted to hear from our House sponsor, Representative Kasarian. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. I am proud to sponsor this bill in the Rhode Island House of Representatives, and I am most grateful to all of my co-sponsors and colleagues who have shown their support for this legislation. I'd like to specifically name a few of my colleagues that are here with us today. We have Representative Ruggiero, Representative Amore, Rep. Bia, who's also a sponsor of one of the important legislation bills around voting, Representative Donovan, and Representative Kislak. Thank you all for your support. There are no other rights without the right to vote. These words have stuck with me ever since I heard Senator Menendez say them last week on the floor of the U.S. Senate. For years, we have seen other states in our nation enact laws that limit voters' access to vote in elections. Just last week, we saw both the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act fail in the U.S. Senate. At this time in history, when voter access is being attacked all across our country, I am proud to stand before you today to say that we are pushing forward to protect the rights of our voters here in Rhode Island. The Let Rhode Island Vote Act is about the voters in Rhode Island. It's about removing antiquated barriers and making it more accessible for voters to participate in our democracy. The Let Rhode Island Vote Act would allow voters to continue to make a plan for how they would like to vote, by mail, early in person, on election day, and do away with making voters give an excuse for choosing to vote by mail or early in person. The Let Rhode Island Vote Act would remove the obstacle of requiring all mail ballot voters to have their ballots notarized and signed by 2 witnesses, a requirement that does not add to the security of our elections, but only makes it more difficult for voters to vote by mail. The Let Rhode Island Vote Act would also strengthen the security of our elections by requiring the Secretary of State to maintain and update our voter rolls 4 times a year. Now, the main points of this legislation that I just mentioned are not risky or, frankly, even new. They are changes that our state temporarily implemented for our last election cycle so voters could safely vote during the pandemic. These changes were successful, and most importantly, the voters really liked them. Time and time again, I heard from constituents who were thrilled that they were able to exercise their vote in an efficient, safe way that fit within their schedules. By passing the Let Rhode Island Vote Act, Rhode Island General Assembly will modernize and protect the right to vote. It will show that while others are afraid of democracy and the voice that their constituencies might have, Rhode Islanders are not. For as the great Congressman John Lewis once said, the right to vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the most powerful, nonviolent tool that we have in a democratic society, and we must use it. Thank you.
I've been told to speak louder. That has not happened many times in my life, but today it's happening. It's very exciting. So we're doing a launch, and Marcella has to speak louder. It's great. So I'd also, to add on to what Representative Kazarian mentioned, I'd also like to take this opportunity to highlight a poll that happened in 2020 among Rhode Island voters, in which we found that 61% of voters support same-day registration. And to take us through this and share a little bit more, it's our pleasure to introduce Senate sponsor, Senator DeMaria.
Thank you so much, Marcella. I am so happy to be here today as the sponsor of the resolution to help move us towards same-day voter registration. And we do know that the majority of Rhode Islanders support this move towards same-day voter registration. The turnout in the elections that we've had here in Rhode Island during the pandemic, as my colleagues have said, have shown that when we make voting easy and accessible, more eligible Rhode Islanders cast their ballots and make their voices heard. But to have their voices heard on election day, they have to be registered to vote. Right now, anybody can show up on election day in Rhode Island and cast their ballot for president. And I believe that they should be able to register and do the same for town council, school committee, the General Assembly, and statewide offices. In the final 30 days leading up to an election, local candidates are still out knocking on doors and making every attempt to invite our neighbors to participate in making decisions about how our communities are run. I want every eligible Rhode Islander I meet to have the opportunity to take that moment of engagement and turn it into action. I don't want them to face the barrier of an antiquated 30-day registration requirement that keeps them out of the process and sends the message that their voice doesn't matter. Passing this resolution and moving us towards same-day voter registration, along with passing the Let Rhode Island Vote Act, are essential to creating a functional democracy where everyone is included and represented. We have the ability to safely and securely modernize our elections and ensure that all eligible Rhode Islanders have the chance to make their voices heard at every level, and now is the time to take action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator, for all your work. And now to hear from our House sponsor, Representative Villa.
Thank you for being here today. Today is a very historical day in the state of Rhode Island. All right. I am Nathan Beer, and I represent the people in the House District 3. I'm the House sponsor of the same-day registration resolution, which will place a question on the ballot in November, asking voters to amend the state constitution, allowing the General Assembly to create a statute permitting voters to register and vote on the same day of election. But I want to be very clear. This is about your constitutional right to vote. This is about making sure everyone has a voice heard and a vote counted. Whether you are black or white, young or old, Democrat, Republican, or independent, this is about ensuring everyone has the ability to cast a full ballot. If they choose to, every vote matters. Voters have been historically marginalized from participation in our electoral process, including our young voters. But going through this, are among the most served same-day registration. If we allow people to register and vote, again, I'm going to repeat, if we allow people to register and vote for the most powerful office in our country, why shouldn't we be able to do the same for town council, state offices? This is about common sense legislation, right? I think this is the right thing to do at this time in our country's history and in our state history. Therefore, I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues to place this question before the voters comes November. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Villa, for your leadership. According to Rhode Island voters, 60% of them support allowing voters to request mail ballots online, and 57% of them support no-excuse voting for mail ballots. To talk more about this and how mail ballots impact a wide range of Rhode Islanders, we have Patrick Crowley from AFL-CIO.
That's a lot of work to take a mask off. Thank you, Marcella. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. My name is Patrick Crowley. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO, representing 80,000 working women and men across the state of Rhode Island, and that just moved. I'm proud to stand here today with my friends in the Let RI Vote campaign in support of the legislation introduced by House Whip Gazarian, Senator Oyer, Senator DeMario, and Representative Beer. All true working-class champions for the people that I represent across the entire state. You know, improving access to mail ballots and early voting is a working-class issue. The old-fashioned idea that working folks show up at a shift on Monday and work 9 to 5 through Friday is antiquated. And it's time that our voting laws recognize 21st century realities of what working people endure every single day. Workers have had to adapt to new ways of the working world, and it's time that our voting laws also adapt to this new way of things. You know, many of the people I represent are the heroes of the pandemic. The teachers and support professionals of our schools, the nurses and CNAs in our hospitals and nursing homes, the first responders of our emergency services, and the state workers who continue to this very moment to work every single day fighting back against this pandemic. We owe it to them, Rhode Island's working-class heroes, one and all, to do everything in our power to give them the right to vote and the right to get to the ballot box when it's best suited to their needs as family members and working people. We can do this. We can do this by removing the requirement of an excuse of a special circumstance for voting by mail. We can do this by removing any and all obstacles to early voting. We can do this by creating an online application system for mail ballots. We can do all of this, and we should do all of it. Because the state of Rhode Island is a better place when more of our friends and neighbors participate in the electoral process. We're a better state, we're a stronger state when more people vote. Now, 180 years ago, the workers of Rhode Island literally had to stage a rebellion to begin the process to get the right to vote. And from the Door Rebellion to the women's suffrage movement to the civil rights movement, the labor movement has stood shoulder to shoulder with everyone who's struggled for the right to cast their ballot. The Let Rhode Island Vote Act is just one more step forward, one more step towards creating that more perfect union that the preamble of our Constitution requires us to strive for. So let's keep going. Let's keep moving forward and this year pass the Let RI Vote Act. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And as we see in the sign next to me, actually, another thing is that 71% of Rhode Islanders are in support of early voting, which we will have Jim Vincent speak to us a little bit about. Jim?
I don't know about you, but I'm fired up for voter access. I'm fired up for voter access. My name is Jim Vincent. I'm the president of the NAACP Providence branch. Proud supporters of the Let RI Vote campaign. I want to highlight Senator DiMario and Representative Bia's bill to place a question on the ballot which will enable the General Assembly to create same-day voter registration, allowing residents to vote a full ballot immediately after registering to vote on Election Day. Let me highlight why this is important. In 2008, Barack Obama was leading in the polls for president with a resonant message of hope and change. Young voters and people of color were so inspired to vote for the first black president and turned out in record numbers. Thankfully, in Rhode Island, there was an option to register and vote on the same day for president. But the opportunity to make their voices heard stopped there. They were left without the ability to vote for any other office or questions on the ballot. 13 years and 7 election cycles later, federal law remains the only protection for the right to register and vote on the same day in our state. And that only applies to the presidential ticket. We can and must do better. We can and must do better. We should allow this for every primary, general, and special election, not just once every 4 years. Dedicated community organizers do heroic work to register as many voters as possible. But why should missing an arbitrary deadline cause disenfranchisement? The 2020 election saw record turnout during a pandemic. How many residents were turned away at their polling places because they were not registered in time? Just this week, the state of Texas is actively limiting the availability of printed voter registration forms from official election administrators, shifting the burden onto voters and organizers. Imagine that. Imagine that. A southern state trying to limit access to the ballot. Imagine that. We can do something here to address this for our residents. Rhode Island can be a leader by enacting same-day voter registration. We must do this. The NAACP has long been on the front lines of the ongoing fight to win and protect our freedom to vote. Very much a part of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. It's in our DNA. It is the #1 priority in terms of black folks in this country today. Voting rights, voter access, #1. The fact is, being a voter starts with being registered. Our legacy on advancing voting rights for all has deep roots in voter registration work to break down a barrier which often disproportionately impacts voters of color. The NAACP Providence branch strongly believes that voting access should be made easier, not harder. If Rhode Islanders truly believe in a multicultural democracy, truly believe it, then the black community should be able to fully participate in that democracy. In recent state elections, we proudly see greater black and Latino representation in our government, a reflection of the growing power of voters of color in the communities they serve. Politicians who implore our community to show up and vote don't pay us lip service. Give us the vote. Give us the vote. Whether we cast our ballot by mail, early, or at a polling place on Election Day, the ability to exercise our right to vote and be counted in our democracy begins with the ability to be registered. It's time to create a pathway to same-day voter registration in Rhode Island. I am proud to be a part of this coalition of 30 groups. I'm proud to have worked with Secretary of State Gorbea over the years. This work is important. I can think of no more important work. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. I just wanted to also highlight a really, really important provision of the Let Rhode Island Vote Act, which is the multilingual voter information hotline and the new extension on the deadline to request a Braille ballot. So having a dedicated line, especially for individuals like my parents and other people in our community who English may not be their main or first language, is really, really important. Because they'll be able to have a reliable and trusted source for official information, which is critical to combat misinformation about elections, especially, as I said, in communities that are not English speaking. This also reduces strain on local election administrators and the Board of Elections so that they can focus on serving as many voters as possible. Improving the Braille ballot request deadline also helps prevent disenfranchisement. It's a fun word when English is not your first language, of voters with visual impairments. So next, we'll hear from the amazing Angela McCalla from the Women's Fund of Rhode Island to speak about how reducing barriers to ballot empowers Rhode Island women and to be voters. 61% of voters agree that we should permanently remove the requirements for 2 witnesses or a notary vote to vote by mail. Angela.
So my name is Angela McCalla, and I am the Policy and Advocacy Program Director for the Women's Fund of Rhode Island. We are excited to be here to express our continued support for the Let RI Vote Act. Due to the role women play in their families and communities, we bring a unique and valuable perspective to policymaking and the political process. We need the support of our legislators to help working women, caregivers, and our vulnerable population with varying health conditions to exercise the right to vote. Many people have challenges that keep them from voting, including access to transportation, affordable childcare, balancing the demand of work, and caregiving responsibilities. For the single parent with limited support for and access to daycare, being able to vote without having to leave their home is saying, your voice matters. Or for our elders with limited mobility who have to figure out how they will get to their polling place on Election Day, providing alternative options is a must. The average working-class Rhode Islander may not have the flexibility or the luxury of knowing their schedules ahead of time and can't take the time they need to go to the polls. We say, no one should have to choose between their jobs and responsibilities or risk the well-being of their families and communities to participate fully and equally in our democracy. I know what it's like to be a young mother needing to hold 2, sometimes 3 jobs while going to school and raising my young child. Also trying to keep a roof over our heads, food on the table, and clothes on our backs. When I look back at that time and think about trying to navigate the voting process, I often wonder why it had to be so difficult. Because of my experience as a city council member in Newport, finding a notary and knowing how to have my mail ballot notarized is familiar to me. However, many in our community find the process obscure and intimidating. We already have a signature matching process to verify a voter's identity, and we know that the signature of notaries and witnesses are not verified by election officials. So how could this not be seen as anything more than a barrier to making it harder to cast mail ballots? During the 2020 election process, we saw that when Rhode Islanders were given more flexible options for casting their ballots, they overwhelmingly chose to vote early and by voting by mail without requiring witnesses and notary or a notary. Since the emergency provision has expired, we've actually held several special elections. And what we saw were voters' mail ballots being rejected because they were not in compliance with the witness notary requirements. Having the rule makes it more likely that more ballots will be rejected. This will have a negative effect on women voters and one that will instill less confidence to participate in the voting process. We know these measures work because we've already done it successfully. Let's address modern problems with modern-day solutions. Let's make the changes permanent for women, for families, for voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Lastly, I wanted to take an opportunity to ask our supporters watching us on Facebook or from home to visit www.letrivote.org to support voting access by sending letters to your legislators, your Senate and your House representatives to urge them to pass the Let Rhode Island Vote and same-day registration. I want to once again thank all of our sponsors who are here today, as well as other legislators who have been gracious enough to join us today, and the coalition members, some of those who could be here, and those who are watching us from home. Thank you for all the work that you have done over the years for voting access. That's it, and if we will be here for any questions. Thank you again for everything that you do.